Hello, good afternoon, ladies. Today is their foundations call. I'm Misty Harper. I'm going to be your host today. And I've got some interesting things to kind of share with you that I'm looking forward to going through. Hopefully, we'll learn some things that we weren't used to or didn't know before. So I'm just going to start with prayer and then I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll go over uh, everything that I've got. I've got a list of words that we're going to talk about. It's going to be kind of interesting. So, Father, we are so thankful for the opportunity to gather together with your people because you feed us every time that we're together. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm thankful for the story of redemption that you have told throughout your word because of your love for us. And I just ask that you would just give us wisdom today. Bless us with your understanding, Father, of what it is that you're trying to convey to each one of us individually for the circumstances in our life today. I just thank you for it in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to talk about some vocabulary words. And hopefully we'll learn some things that are kind of interesting. I'm going to start with, oh, why did it do that? Hold, please. There we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about first Tanakh. Did you know that that's a contraction? I did not know that that was considered a contraction. So it's a contraction, and we're going to talk about each word that makes that up. So it is the entire Hebrew Bible, which is basically what we would modern day call the Old Testament, which don't necessarily like using that word a whole lot. But it's also called Mikra, which Mikra means comes from the root word kara. And in the King James Version, it's actually the word that's translated convocation, which I thought was really interesting. And that word kara means to cry out or to call. It is the word that we are to be cried out aloud. And the first mention of it here is in Genesis 39, 14, and 15. We're not going to look at that today. I just wanted you to know what it was because I thought it was very interesting that it would be that the word itself for Tanakh was, and Mikra was rooted in crying out because it's so important that we speak the word because his word doesn't return void. So it's important that we say those things out of our mouth. When I read my Torah portion, of course, I live alone, so I have this luxury. But when I read my Torah portion, I read it out loud. Sometimes I catch more things and I'll be, wait a minute, I need to go back and look at that again. So I'm not saying that you need to do that. I'm just telling you what I do. But it's also important that we speak the word. We speak the word over our situations. We speak the word in our prayers. It can be really a turnaround for a lot of situations. I've seen it happen because his word doesn't ever return void. So first part of this contraction is Torah, which are the instructions. We're going to discuss this in the next two slides, and we're going to kind of do a little bit of teaching on this, just kind of what the Torah is about more than the word itself. It can also be referred to as the Humash, meaning the five. It's also called the Pentateuch, which is the 5 books of Moses. So there are several indications of how we can look at that, what we'll see in it. The second part of this contraction is Nevi'im, which are the prophets, and they're listed there for you if you want to write them down. I'm also going to include this PowerPoint on the notes for this call today, so you'll be able to go back and get them if you don't get them all. Last is Ketuvim, which are the writings, and so that's what makes up Tanakh. And it can be further separated into different sections, including history, wisdom, poetry, and psalms, which I thought was interesting because you would think that psalms would kind of fall into the poetry section, but it's got its own category the way that they look at it. So I thought that was very interesting. And I have so many notes than I did here and in my notebook. So I may be going back and forth. So I apologize if it looks a little crazy today. So Torah is from the root word yara, to teach or instructions. So I looked up the word yara where it was mentioned, and I love this. Again, I think it's so interesting because it says yara means to cast, to lay foundations, to sprinkle, to water. And I thought, how interesting, because when we are speaking the word, we are casting a vision in our words. We are casting his vision into the world. Remember how we talked about that from the beginning, that we are peacemakers because we are in this world and because we are walking in his ways. We are peacemakers just by our presence. So it's this same idea that we are, when we are speaking his words, we are casting a vision, we are laying a foundation, we are sprinkling the world and the things that are happening right now with his word. So with his instructions, that's really one of the biggest things that I want you to get out of Torah, is that it doesn't mean law. And if you've heard this before, then you can tune out for a second, but it doesn't mean law. It means instruction. So it's instructions for how we are to walk the way. So it's really important that we have an understanding of what those things are so that we can walk it out effectively and be holy as he is holy. So we're going to talk specifically about the Torah, and I'm going to tell you right up front that where I got a lot of this information on these next two slides is from Bema Discipleship. Very interesting podcast. If you've never listened to it, you definitely should. It's available on all the platforms that you can get podcasts on. And it's also, they also have a website, bemadiscipleship.com, which I'm going to have on the last line of this slide. But he talks a lot about the story of how Yehovah and his people were torn apart and brought together, and how his redemption and his love for his people was so tremendous. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that. So in Genesis, this is where Yah chooses his partner, and he says, okay, this people, this group of people, they are my people. And he establishes a basis for this partnership, and we begin to meet all the characters that are in the word and the main story. Genesis is so action-packed, so much happens historically throughout Genesis. It's kind of hard to keep up sometimes, but, and you know, when we get in there and we can only cover one verse when we're studying the portion, either when we just do it on our own in our congregations on the portion that we do on Fridays, sometimes. In Exodus, the partner chooses him because they had a choice. I read some statistics and historical data that said that it is possible that there was only 20% of the Hebrews who came out of Egypt when Moses led them out. 20%. Can you imagine that? 80% of the people chose not to choose him because of whatever reason. But I'm going to say most of the time we can boil those reasons down to fear. So it's kind of a sad thing, because we know that the Bible is cyclical. It repeats itself. And so when it comes around for our time for ultimate redemption, we've already received redemption through Yeshua, but when it comes time for our ultimate redemption, when people return, when his kingdom comes to earth, then we are going to be just, we're going to have the same choice. We're going to have to choose him. That's what we're going to have to do. I'm going to pause for just a second, and I am going to ask Katie, do you feel comfortable that I could make you a co-host so that you can let some people in if they come in?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Well, I say that. It doesn't want to let me do that. Why? Oh, there we go. Thank you for your help. I appreciate that. All right, back to my slides. Okay. In Leviticus, he defines the partnership. That's where we're at right now, right? And so we are learning kind of what we're supposed to do, what his expectations are. And it has that root of lev is heart. And so it's all about the heart of the matter. Oh, Brad Scott did a really great teaching on the heart of the matter. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely look it up. Then in Numbers, God shapes his partner. He takes the people and he says, okay, I'm going to mold you a little bit more, and I'm going to put you into this place, and I'm going to show you how to be. Then in Deuteronomy, he asks us to remember. There are over 20 references to remember in Deuteronomy, just in the first about remember, and also don't forget. So I think it's very interesting because he's reminding us, okay, we've been through all of this stuff. Now, don't forget this. Please remember this. So it's interesting how he looks out for us. This is the website that I was telling you about. And all of their podcasts are on there. There are 5 seasons. I've only made it through the first season and a little bit of the second season. And it's so rich and so good. And the guy that teaches it, his name is Marty Solomon. And he was actually a disciple of the man who does Aleph Beta, David Foreman. He is a disciple of David Foreman's. And so he talks about that quite a bit in his podcast. So it's pretty interesting. So this part I also love. He talks about how Genesis is the preface. It's the beginning, it's the introduction, it's how everything is. And he wants us to know that he is good. He wants us to know that we can trust him. Again, we learn, who the family members are and kind of some history about it. And that AIJJ right there, it actually stands for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Just kind of a reminder of this is who the family is. This is kind of what we learn throughout this. So then he goes into the narrative and he talks about a tale of 2 kingdoms, empire versus shalom. Don't we see that even today? It looks the same. It's still empire, that kingdom of wealth and money and basically trying to achieve something, versus shalom and that peace and walking in Jehovah's ways and knowing who he is and who we are, what he's called us to as well. There's some more information there about the different books, and I won't talk about that a whole lot, but I do want to point out down at the bottom in Deuteronomy where it says, remember where you came from, AOW, alien, orphans, and widows. And what he talks about when he addresses this section is so rich because it's all about the community, and it's all about how they treated those people who were the alien, the orphan, and the widow, or who were the weaker, who were not as able-bodied as the others, what they did for them as a community. So it's a really great podcast, and it's really, to me, very heartfelt, and I just feel that story of redemption in everything that he says, and it's just a really really awesome situation there. You got to go check it out. All right, so our next word is Brit Hadashah, which means new covenant. Of course, I'm not a huge fan of that because that page that's in the middle should be just ripped out. It's not old and new. It's all one book. It's all one story. It's all about redemption. It's all about the Father and his love for us and what he's calling us to and who we are, just because of how good he is. It doesn't have anything to do with my abilities, my interests, my hobbies, how well I can speak or what I look like. It's none of those things. It's because of his goodness that we are who we are and how this redemption story spans the entire book. So I did look up Hadashah because I was like, I don't remember seeing that word. So it's only been used once. It was only used once in the Tanakh. And I put the scripture reference there, and it's basically a list of names. And Hadashah is the feminine version of Hadash, which Hadash means new. So that's just a roundabout way of getting to the fact that that's the word that means new, because you would think it would be the other way around because, Brit is short, new is short. Doesn't work that way. So Brit means covenant, which is from the idea of cutting or carving out, bara. It is also the condition of this covenant, the promise of Yah, the precepts of Yah that Israel was to keep. I thought that was interesting because it is all about the redemption. It's all about the covenant. It's all about us walking in his ways and making sure that we are doing our best to be holy as he is holy. That doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean we don't mess up. It doesn't mean that he's going to beat us every time that we don't do what he says, but he does give us the direction. I can tell you for myself personally that walking this walk, I have been more free in this walk than I ever was when, before in the other way that I walked, which wasn't bad because it brought me to this place. But I am more free now than I ever was then, as far as the peace that I have, the not questioning, because so much of what I was taught was so ethereal in a sense that, well, don't do this because, let the Spirit lead you. Well, yes, the Spirit is going to lead you, but you also have to have his Torah. You also have to have his instructions in you, because it says that the Holy Spirit will remind you of those things when the time comes. Well, if it's not there, is he going to remind you? I mean, I've heard some pretty amazing testimonies of some Muslims who had dreams about Yeshua and are coming to the faith and all of those things. But those aren't the kinds of things I'm talking about. I'm talking about that sanctification process, that daily walk where we are striving to be more like him. That's where we're at. So the Brit Hadashah can also be broken down into 3 categories, like the Tanakh is, which I think is interesting as well. The Besorah Hagalah, these are the Gospels, which relates to the Torah because it gives you the characters, it gives you the story. It's about the redemption. It's 4 different pictures of who Yeshua is. You'll notice in this list that Luke and Acts are kind of put together. You can kind of consider them one unit. Besorah means good news, and Geilah means redemption. So that's really what it's about, because that's where we learn all about Yeshua and what happened. Okay, Igorot. This means letters. And it relates to Ketuvim, and there are 8 general letters. I'm not going to list them for you. There's 13 letters from Paul. They're there on your screen. Igoret means letter or epistle. Igoret, not Igorot. Igorot is the multiple of Igoret. And it appears to come from Igar, which denoted one hired, which again, another little interesting thing that I saw in this was how were letters delivered back then? I mean, they didn't have the USPS, which, is probably a good thing because they haven't done a very good job lately. Not for me anyway. But they didn't have USPS. They were hand delivered. There were couriers who actually took the letters from one place to another. That was the whole idea. So I thought that was very interesting. Then the last part of these 3 sections is Hitgalut, which is revelation, and it relates to Nevi'im. And this word means revelation or unveiling. Sometimes Chazon is used, which is vision instead, which I thought was really cool, because sometimes we think that all the cool stuff started happening in the New Testament, and that's really not what happened. There are some really interesting stories all throughout the Torah and even the writings and the prophets of things that happened and where Yah showed up and how he gave visions to people. So this is not a new concept. I did hear some historical data about this the other day, about how John ended up on the Isle of Patmos. And I wish I could repeat it for you, but I wouldn't do it justice, so I don't want to try. But I did find it interesting of how he ended up there. I think I had a note on this. I did. So the word galut, which is part of this hit galut, is a carrying away, and it comes from the word, and it also means exile, but it comes from the word galah, which is to make naked, to disclose, reveal, or uncover. So it all kind of lines up with what we view to be revelation. So I thought that was great too. So now we're going to talk about some miscellaneous things, and I'm keeping this fairly short today. I want to give you the opportunity to say some more things and give me some more words that you have no idea what they meant. But we're going to talk about a few miscellaneous things that are kind of random. I picked a few things. I tried to relate them all back to things that would be considered part of the word and learning about his ways, those kinds of things. So we're going to start with the Mishnah. The Mishnah, meaning repetition, is the earliest authoritative body of Jewish oral law. It records the views of rabbinic sages known as the Tanaim, from the Aramaic Tanah, meaning to teach. So I'm going to show you some visuals here at the end of some of these books so that you'll have an idea of what I'm talking about. And I want to tell you too that I'm giving you this information, but I'm not supporting necessarily some of these writings and trying to get you to read them. I'm just giving you information. I personally have not read any of these that we're going to talk about here, simply because I really try to focus on the word to the utmost of my ability. And I'm not saying that commentary is bad or that you shouldn't read other things. I read books. I've read Becky books, those kinds of things. But I'm just telling you that these particular things I have purposely not looked at. But I wanted to give you the information because if it's something that you're interested in, I want you to go and check it out. And who knows what you could learn and be able to share with us. The Gemara. In Aramaic, it means to study and to know. It's a collection of scholarly discussions on Jewish law, and it's dated from around 200 to 500 AD. The Talmud, the source from which the code of Jewish halakha is derived. It's made up of the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Mishnah is the original written version of the oral law, and the Gemara is the record of the rabbinic discussions following this writing down. I've heard a lot of things about the Talmud, and it's kind of interesting. I do know there are some things in there that when you look at it, you can see, oh, this is why they attacked Yeshua for this particular thing, or that kind of deal. So there's some interesting things. The Targum, this is a new one that I just actually learned about in the last week, that I had no idea what it was. But it's an Aramaic translation of the Tanakh from the 1st century AD, when Hebrew was on the decline as a spoken language. So Hebrew was going away in a sense. Nobody was really speaking Hebrew anymore. So we're going to say that the Targum is the earliest translation. It's before King James, it's before the NIV, all of those things. So that's kind of the first translation. It is available, where I'm going to show you what it looks like. There's a couple of them actually. So I pulled all of these images off of Amazon, and I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of what they look like on the surface and let you look, if you're interested in trying to find out more about this. So the Torah, of course, we know it's in our Bibles that we hold in our hands, like this one. I mean, it's all here, it's all in here, all of it's there. But there are specific books that are only Torah. So that's an option that you can look at. Oh, and I have a complete Jewish Bible, which I really like too. The Chumash, which is again similar, it's the Torah, it's the first 5 books. This particular one is in Hebrew. It opens from right to left instead of left to right. The Tanakh, I thought this was interesting because this is a Hebrew Tanakh, and it is put on Amazon under the by the Israel Ministry of Education, and it's listed as a textbook for high school students. So I thought that was interesting. The fact even that it's listed as a textbook for high school students is amazing, and you know, like the word should be listed for high school students here. And if you're homeschooling, good for you because you can do it. This was one I threw in because it's a personal favorite of mine. I have read this book, and there are several versions of Matthew that are written in Hebrew, and you can go research them. The particular one that Nehemiah Gordon used in this book is Shem Tov, and it was very very interesting how he just showed pieces of it. In the Hebrew, you can see one of the script that it's written in, that kind of thing, on the cover here. But the book itself is pretty interesting. It's very short, and I think actually you can get it on Kindle if you have the Kindle app on your phone, or if you have a Kindle. Then here's a Mishnah. This one is actually in English. They aren't all in English. A lot of them are in Hebrew, so that's something to consider when you go out looking for some of these resources. Make sure you're getting one you can read. If you can read Hebrew, fantastic. If not, be cautious. Make sure you know what you're looking at whenever you go to buy something. This is the Gemara. This was actually the only thing I could find that was related to Gemara, and this is actually a workbook. So I didn't look very hard, mind you, but that was the only one I could find. So that's kind of an example there. The Talmud. So there's lots of variations of this. I chose this one because I'm kind of a doodad person and, you know, eclectic about stuff. And so I liked this because it came in its own little carrying case and these small little books. I read something in my studies about how they will actually take the Talmud and they will read maybe this page and this page, if you've got the book open, this page and this page, every day for sometimes weeks at a time until they have it, until they know it, until they can walk it. And I thought that was very interesting because I wonder if we put that same kind of dedication into our word and understanding, again, his ways, his Torah, his instruction. This is the last one. It's the Targum, and it's the one I told you about, I just learned of. And so I gave you 2 examples of this one. Someone I know recently bought the one that's on the top, and the one that's on the bottom is actually the Targum of Psalms. So, but it is actually in English. So they're both in English, but I just thought it was interesting because what happened was basically they took the Hebrew, they translated it to Aramaic. So if you get it in English, you're actually getting another translation that went from Hebrew to Aramaic to English. So understand some things about translations, because translations are subjective in some ways. So you've got to be cautious. Know something about the translation that you're looking at, what you're interested in, and what you want to read, because it's can be slanted according to who translated it. So just pay attention to that. That's just important. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to get where I can see everybody. Okay. So how many of you guys, did you guys learn anything that you didn't know today? And what are some things that you wish I would have talked about? Because I am sure that this is going to be an ongoing theme that we're going to be able to talk about. That you want to know, like, well, what is this word? I heard this word. What does that mean? Do you guys have any of those? No? Y'all are easy today? It's all good.
What is the Targum? Is that just the Torah? Is that other writings? What is the Targum?
It is the Torah.
Just the Torah. Okay.
Just the Torah. So the person that was posting about it was just talking about how interesting it was and that they were getting so much out of it. And I thought, well, that'd be something to check out. Maybe it'd be interesting to see.
Is it different than the Chumash? Because I have the Chumash, and that's in English and Hebrew.
Right. So yes, it is, in the sense that when you open the Chumash, you've got both Hebrew and English, and you can see both of those. And you're basically looking at the translation on this side of the Hebrew over here, and you can compare them. Well, in the Targum, it's Aramaic, which is similar to Hebrew in some senses, but it's not the same. And I did not see any versions that actually had the Aramaic and the English together. I just saw them in English. One thing I did think of later that I thought, oh, well, we could talk about that too. And I'll put this on another later on. We'll talk about it. But the Siddur and what that is and what it's for and those kinds of things. So that's always something that I'm going to have on my list for next time. And I also put a post on the Facebook page for the portion, hoping that some other people would have some other things that they want to know too. And I still have questions. This was only part of the questions that I had. Specifically, the Gemara was one of the questions that I had. But I still have a whole list of questions that I've got to get through for people, things that people wanted to know. So if you guys don't really have any other questions or ideas, then I am going to stop the recording and we will move on. I know maybe I would like to pray for you, Katie, if we could do that too. Carol, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.